Thank you, Ingvar. Thank you, everybody. I'll try to summarize this case study, which I carried out last year as part of the overall study. We'll take the next slide, please. I'll try to give you, first of all, some information about Wales, some of the key characteristics, and then we'll outline the policy and institutional framework before comparing with the approach of the study, and we'll finish with a few takeaway points. Next, please. Now you see on the map where Wales fits into the United Kingdom. It has a growing population, mainly due to inward migration. It's over 3 million. And a big development has been devolution. 22 years ago, we have established the Welsh government, Welsh parliament. Indeed, today, it's election day for the Welsh parliament. So there is a lot of excitement about it. Now, they have considerable autonomy in most domestic policy areas, health, education, planning, you name it. And there is growing bilingualism, use of both English and Welsh languages, strong national identity. So now we're talking about the Welsh nation, one of the 4 nations of the UK. Next slide. We have a steadily changing economic structure, but still a higher proportion of people work in manufacturing and in agriculture than the rest of the UK. There is inward investment also in manufacturing. And there is a territorial imbalance. The bigger cities are in the south. They generate a very high proportion of economic output of Wales. Now, the whole of Wales is not one, and there are 22 local government units, LAUs. Next slide. In terms of quality of life, we have an effort in the last 10 years, starting 2011, extensive consultation, 2014, the Wales we want, modeled on UN approach about USDs. And we have a major piece of legislation. In 2015, we have the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which establishes 7 common goals and extensive institutional arrangements. They include 2 new structures, the Office of the Future Generations Commissioner and public services boards for each of the 22 local authority areas. Of course, there are existing structures that are brought into the scheme, and they all have duties to pursue the well-being goals and sustainable development. Next, please. Now, the Future Generations Commissioner. The Future Generations Commissioner provides assistance and advice to public bodies and to these local public service boards. They have powers, the Commissioner has powers to carry out formal reviews and make recommendations, uses a great variety of tools from various publications, personalized feedback to individual public bodies, live labs, leadership academies, a very interactive way of dealing with all these public bodies. And it has been very active in different policy areas, from planning and policy making, transport, housing, decarbonization, skills, health, wellness, etc. The public services boards are a local partnership with the core partners being the local authority, the local health board, fire service, natural resources body. They produced already in 2017 assessments of the local well-being. They produced local well-being plans with their own indicators, and they report annually on progress. Similarly, we have 44 public bodies, that is ministries, local authorities, health authorities, fire, natural resources, arts, sports, etc. bodies. And they have to produce, and they produce a well-being statement with objectives and how they will help achieve the 7 goals, and an annual report on progress against these objectives. Next, please. In terms of overall accountability and reporting, we have in the Act specified statutory reports annually. The Chief Statistician of Wales produces a report against the indicators, which I'll present in a minute. The Commissioner produces various progress reports, but every 5 years, once in the parliamentary cycle, a major report on what has been achieved with a thorough analysis, conclusions, recommendations. So the report, the first such report was published last May 2020, 800 pages, amazing detail. The Auditor General for Wales has an obligation and has developed a certain methodology and produced again his report in May 2020. And all these documents were examined by the Parliament, the West Parliament, and last month, in March actually, the committee produced a detailed report, which is quite critical, and I'll take that into account in summarizing at the end, which responded to all this analysis with its own conclusions and recommendations. Next, please.
Just a quick note that we have 5 minutes to go, if it's okay for you.
I thought I had more than 5 minutes because I started 5 minutes ago. So if you don't mind, I'll use the 15 minutes. I will not exceed. So you see a complex picture there, where the commissioner, the yellow block on the left, supports various bodies, but also provides policy inputs to the government and the assembly, the parliament. And you have this horizontal public services boards, which are the territorial dimension at local level. Next, please. The measurement is based on 46 indicators that were endorsed by the Welsh Parliament in 2016, and they rely a lot on people-related measurements, and they use quite extensively surveys, regular and ad hoc surveys, and overall they're approaching a citizen-centric type of approach. And the next slide. Next slide, please. You will see that each of the indicators has been assigned to one or more of the 7 goals, and also to one or more of the 17 SDGs. Next, please. Now we tested the approach that emerged from the overall study by assigning indicators to individual subdomains for 2 periods, 2010 to 12 and 2016-19, and the dashboard was available for all the 22 local areas. You will see in the maps that there were developments over that period. Some things changed. In the next slide, you will see the ranking, the changes in the ranking. Now, the south, at the bottom, you see the red area. So there is still a prevalence in the traditional urban and rural, urban and industrial, former industrial areas to be quite low in this ranking. Next, please. Now, comparing with the conceptual map that the study developed, we assigned 46 indicators to the domains and the subdomains, and noted that life maintenance and life flourishing dimensions were fully covered. In fact, life maintenance with many indicators for each of the subdomains, and also in life flourishing, quite a few in each of the subdomains, but there are gaps in good life enablers, especially in the ecological sphere, but also gaps in the other spheres. So the overall comparison suggested that the QoL approach in Wales is more focused on outcomes than on enablers, and it is more people-oriented than place-oriented. The next slide shows this mapping. You will see the gaps, no color, on several of the subdomains of the enablers pillar, especially ecological sphere, but also gaps in the personal and socioeconomic spheres. Next, please. So I've got some takeaway points. Some of them are the particularly strong points we've noted. There is a very advanced policy implementation with the legislation, the act establishing the goals and extensive institutional arrangements for the whole of Wales and for the local level in Wales. They're accompanied by an extensive monitoring system and by a broad range of governance mechanisms. And I think it's worth noting two other points. One is the active advocacy role played by the Future Generations Commissioner, who takes initiatives, encourages, pressurizes, proposes, and was characteristic that already a year ago in May, June, we had the commissioner coming out with a very specific set of proposals for the post-COVID recovery plan, and a direct relevance to key policy areas. The whole activity associated with the quality of life concept and measurement is directly relevant to planning and placemaking, transport, housing, decarbonization, skills, childhood experiences, health, and so on. And the next slide, however, brings out some of the less strong points we noted. The indicator framework is quite impressive, but you saw there were some gaps concerning QoL enablers pillar in particular. Also, the local bodies, the local partnerships and the public bodies are using some of the national indicators, but they also use some of their own indicators they have set up themselves, they set themselves. And so there is no strict, clear correspondence between the Welsh level and the other levels. And significantly, there are delays in setting milestones. They had agreed 10 to 12 milestones before the COVID crisis, and this has been halted. And these are the milestones against which they will be measuring the progress. And also, we have a very high degree of acceptance and commitment by all actors to the process. But both the Commissioner's report and the Parliament's report last month stress that many of the public bodies are slow in adapting, changing the culture, adapting and aligning with the principles of the Act. Especially the health sector is quite behind, and even more behind now with the COVID crisis, giving priority to other things. They also criticize that the implementation of the Act is under-resourced in different ways. And last but not least, they criticize the complexity of the landscape of partnership structures, plethora of legislative and reporting requirements, which acts to some extent as a barrier or disincentive for some of them to participate more fully. I finish here. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm available for any questions you may have.